This is America's Roundtable from Washington, D.C., a weekly radio program with leading voices from America and international thinkers representing the academia, business, media, think tanks, and the political arena. I'm Joel Adensami, your co-host, joined by Natasha Sardorj, an economist and chairman of the International Leaders Summit. This weekend, we are pleased to be joined by Congressman Frank Wolf. Congressman Wolf, the most senior of the 11 members of the House of Representatives from Virginia, is serving in his 16th term in Congress. Congressman Wolf sits on the powerful House Appropriations Committee, where he is the chairman on the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee. He also serves on the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development and State and Foreign Operations Subcommittees. In addition, he is the co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, a bipartisan organization made up of more than 200 members of Congress who work together to raise awareness about international human rights issues. Congressman Wolf, we welcome you to America's Roundtable.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Congressman Wolf, this past week you called for the creation of a select committee to investigate the terrorist attack in Benghazi and subsequent revelations that followed. And in a letter to House Speaker John Boehner, you stated that there is an urgent need to establish a House or bicameral committee to investigate the September 11, 2012 attack so that Congress can fulfill its constitutional responsibilities to legislate and educate the American people. And Congressman Wolf, could you kindly elaborate on your call for a select committee?
The courts have upheld Congress's right to have committees like this. The policies behind the Watergate and Iran-Contra were really basically twofold. One, to hold public hearings whereby there would be the gathering of information that if Congress felt it was necessary, and of course, if you remember both of them, they did feel it was necessary, to enact legislation. So to gather information to enact legislation to deal with issues like this. The second purpose for the Watergate and the Iran-Contra was to educate the American people. Had you not had the Watergate Committee, there would have been no education, no information given to the American people. If you recall, and maybe everything is an age factor around here, but I was alive, actually worked here in Washington during the Watergate years. The Nixon administration and the Justice Department was doing everything they could to keep information from coming out.
Indeed.
So this is an informational. Secondly, you have the CIA involved, so you have to have people involved from the Intelligence Committee. You have a Department of Defense involved, so you need people involved for the Armed Services Committee. You have the operation of the government, so you need people from the Government Operations Committee. You have, it was a consulate under the jurisdiction of the State Department, so you have the State Department involved, so you need the Foreign Affairs Committee. And lastly, you have the Attorney General, who is sort of at the center of all of this, who never has cooperated with Congress on Fast and Furious and many of these other things. So you have the Judiciary Committee. So rather than having 5 separate hearings and probes in the House and 3 or 4 in the Senate, to tie it into one, because some people are saying the timelines that they're getting from the agencies that they're involved with are different than timelines that other agencies are giving other committees. So the concept is to have one staff focused like a laser beam, made up of people from the various areas. Some are from Foreign Affairs, some are from Judiciary, some are from Government Operations, some are from Armed Services, some are from the Intelligence Committee, to go about it that way. Because if you really don't do that, the likelihood of the American people ever finding out what happened is very small.
Indeed, Congressman Wolf. In your letter, you reminded Speaker Boehner of a September 25 letter to President Obama signed by 8 House members requesting more information about the attack and the administration's response. And it will be important for our listeners to know that the White House has repeatedly canceled scheduled briefings and to date has not provided the chairman of national security committees and subcommittees the information requested. And why do you think the Obama administration is not responding to legitimate questions raised by the U.S. Congress? And Congressman, through your experiences in Congress and observing the Watergate hearings and all the other issues that came about, including the Iran-Contra issue, have you seen other examples of intransigence when it comes to national security issues and protecting the lives of our fellow Americans?
No administration, either Republican or Democrat, wants to get out information that they think may not be to their benefit. Secondly, you had the story broke, if you recall, early in September, and the elections were coming very close, so there was an effort to make sure that this never was covered very much. And if you recall watching the news, most of the networks did not cover it, other than Fox News and one or two others. There was not very much coverage of it. Now that the election is out of the way, there's more coverage of it. So I'm not so sure that all administrations, both Republican and Democrat, haven't done this. Now, to the credit of the Reagan administration, when the Iran-Contra thing came up, they embraced this because President Reagan wanted everything to come out.
Right.
They never fought it. They joined it, if you will. But I'm not surprised. I mean, here you have Eric Holder, who did not cooperate with the Congress or with anyone on the Fast and Furious. You had a border agent killed. You had a number of young students down in Mexico killed with weapons here. You may have seen the report a while back.
Indeed.
But they didn't cooperate at all. And so right now there are no plans for Secretary of State Clinton to testify. Well, how could you have a thorough hearing and come out with a report that really made sense to see? Why did they not beef up the embassy security?
Indeed.
What did the communications say? So you mean you're going to have an investigation and you're not going to call the Secretary of State? Or no one has said that they're going to call Eric Holder. Right. Eric Holder knew of all of this, certainly late in the summer it's come out. So did he say anything to John Brennan at the White House? Did he say anything to Jack Lew, the Chief of Staff? So to say that you're going to have an in-depth examination, but you're not going to ask Eric Holder to come and testify. So that's why I think you need a select committee that kind of transcends all of those agencies, the intelligence, the Defense Department, the Justice Department, the State Department, together in one center point, rather than having different people, because you got to make sure what questions are being asked. Is the information that this agency gives, does it fit with the other? And by having a one-stop shop, if you will, that way it can be guaranteed. And so again, back to the reasons you want to do it, so you can know, do you need any additional legislation? But you also need to do it, equally important, to educate the American people so they know either they know there was nothing wrong, there were no problems, and so they know that, or there was a problem and they know that. The original Watergate resolution asked them to look into either illegal or improper activities.
Right.
When they set the Watergate up, they did not know where the Watergate was going. Only after the hearings began did this story go to the point that it is. So I think if there's no problem, the administration ought to want it there whereby they can rest the case and say, see, there was no problem, or if there was a problem, the American people can know.
Right. The day after the Benghazi attacks, we dedicated significant time on America's Roundtable, focusing on the terrorist attack, as we were joined by the Wall Street Journal's editorial board member, Matthew Kaminsky, and taking into account statements relayed by the eyewitnesses from the neighborhood of the consulate, the evidence of mortar rounds hitting the consulate facilities, the fact that it happened on September 11, and the unrelated YouTube video, which was released in June 2012. For us, at that moment, everything pointed to a brazen terrorist attack. But what was very troubling, for the sake of elections, the administration chose to attack the freedom of speech, as expressed by the video, rather than condemn terrorists who killed 4 Americans. Congressman Wolf, the highly appreciated and admired American value of saving one life has inspired us all and has been an important affirmation for fellow Americans and respected by citizens around the world. What happened to America's firm principle in emphasizing the value of one life and responding to saving the lives of 4 Americans on that fateful day on September 11, 2012?
Well, that's why you need the hearings. You would certainly want to bring in the CIA station chief who was out there. You would want to bring in and get testimony from the team that was supposedly sent out and never went on to Benghazi. You would want to get information from all the people that were in the compound. That's why you have to bring everybody together, because right now you just cannot rely. Both of you, I don't know if you were around during the Watergate. The Nixon administration
Indeed.
said that there was no problem. There was nothing wrong. Everything was fine until they forced the information to come out. Nobody had any idea. So the answer to the question is, no one knows the circumstances, the reasons, the why, the communications, whatever went on. That's why you need an in-depth select committee to be able to go with its own staff, its own budget, to be able to go on. Give them a timeline so this thing does not drag out. But you really need that. There almost isn't any other way. Had you not had the Watergate panel, you would have never found out about Watergate.
In fact, it was interesting to hear Senator Feinstein also communicate the importance of getting to the bottom of this here. And it seems that it is not just an issue that is a great concern for those on the Republican side, but it is an issue that has been raised well on the Democratic side. So your call for a bipartisan initiative is truly commendable. And from your letter written to Congressman Boehner, to Speaker of the House Boehner, have you received a response, and what do you think will be the next step, sir?
I don't know what the next step is. We're continuing to send out Dear Colleague letters to make the case for it. I think the next step probably rests with you all, with the media. If there are op-ed pages and pieces and editorials and people speaking out saying this is very, very important, that the Congress should do it, my sense that it will happen. If it's treated with silence and nobody says anything, my sense is it may not happen. But I think it really depends on whether or not the media covers this story, talks it up, supports the concept of doing this. For instance, there was one of the people who was involved in Benghazi on the attack on the consulate. His picture was apparently picked up. Mm-hmm. They tracked him down. He was crossing over into Turkey. He was arrested in Turkey. The Turks would not allow us, the FBI, to interview him. All the while, the trail is getting colder and colder and colder. The Turks then sent him to Tunisia. The Tunisians would not allow us to interview him for the longest period of time. And it's my understanding that he's not been allowed to be interviewed even as of just the other day. Here's Tunisia that gets $320 million of foreign aid from the United States government, and they will not even allow our FBI team to interview a person who there's direct proof that he was at the scene. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, did you know that? Did the American people know that we had the person? The trail is getting colder. We cannot talk to him. If that's the case, should we continue to give foreign aid to Tunisia that's keeping the FBI team from interviewing him? Different issues like this. I have not even seen it in the paper that the fellow is into Tunisia. I have not seen it in the paper that the Tunisian government will not allow our FBI team to even interview him. So all these things come together, and there are so many other statements made that we have to verify or not. So if there's no problem, then I think the administration ought to want this to take place. Because if it is as they say, then the special select committee would come out to say there was no problem. But if there were a problem, it would obviously address it. So I think it's to the benefit of Republicans and Democrats and everybody involved to have a select committee.
Right. And what would you think that the timeline would be for establishing the committee and continuing with the next steps?
Well, I think the preliminary, it ought to be established as soon as possible. And I don't think you have to let this thing drag on. I think if they had subpoena power, and you had people from the Intelligence Committee, people from the Armed Service Committee, people from the Government Operations Committee, people from the Judiciary Committee, and people from the Foreign Relations Committee, my sense this can be done in 3 months or less.
In fact, Congressman Wolf, we were hearing a number of comments coming in from Europe and other places as well, from journalists saying that it was truly an act that a brazen terrorist act that was not there was no response to it, and it certainly
we don't even know there's no response. You're right.
Yeah, it just seemed that there was an absence of a firm position. We have sent the wrong signals to our allies in the region. And it seemed that there was a void in a principled foreign policy response.
That's the way it appears to me. That's why, again, I see no other way. If there's not a select committee, the truth will never come out.
Right. Thank you so much, Congressman Wolf, for joining us on America's Roundtable.
Thank you, Congressman Wolf.
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
This weekend on America's Roundtable, you heard from Congressman Frank Wolf, who communicated that the U.S. Congress has a responsibility to educate the American people on the circumstances surrounding the attack, which led to the death of 4 Americans, including a U.S. ambassador. Congressman Wolf and his colleagues have encouraged us citizens to call our respective representatives in Congress and support the call for a select committee to investigate the Benghazi attack. In a letter to Speaker John Boehner, Congressman Wolf wrote, "The White House has repeatedly canceled scheduled briefings and to date has not provided the chairman of national security committees and subcommittees the additional information requested regarding the attack and the administration's response. The most revealing fact is that during CIA Director David Petraeus' testimony before Congress on Friday this past week, he stated that he knew from the start the Libya attack was terrorism. However, David Petraeus states that the references to the Al-Qaeda were taken out of the original CIA memo. This has raised even more questions about the possible White House interference in deliberately changing the facts coming from the intelligence unit. Was this done for political reasons and to aid President Obama's election campaign? Radical websites and propaganda organs are showcasing the weakness of the United States. In fact, websites of jihadist groups are calling for martyrs to attack American military and diplomatic posts overseas. And according to media reports, these calls for attacks against America has increased 5-fold since Benghazi. Now, the Obama administration's narrative of the Arab Spring is falling apart with an emboldened radical Islamic front in northern Africa. The Arab Spring has brought forth a harsh winter of reality with greater uncertainty about the future of the region and instability. We'll be right back. This is America's Roundtable. Visit us at americasrt.com. Follow us on Twitter at americasrt. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook. Like and share.